Hello, everyone. I'm admitting one more person into the meeting, and we will be starting very shortly. So I'm Dave Munger. I've been asked by the Council of Neighbors and Organizations to host a series of these webcasts on a variety of subjects. Let me tell you really briefly about the Council of Neighbors and Organizations. I think most of you know, but it exists to do the sorts of things that are usually done in a city our size by a county or a city department. And that's to help neighborhoods organize, help them represent themselves before the local governments, help them resolve disputes, help them participate in various city processes. The series of webcasts that we're doing really can be categorized in one of four ways. One is we're doing this sort of series, which is how to use social media, and we'll be doing a few more on that, including on Microsoft Teams and Facebook Live and a few other things like that. We also, as we did yesterday, we'll do some webcasts on how to build community spirit or neighborhood spirit, how to do things in your neighborhood in a time like we're going through right now when distancing is important to our health. We also are doing, and they will start next week, a series on local civics. Some of you from Kona will remember, and maybe some of you others will remember when we did coffee and civics and then civics on tap. These will be pairing Colorado Springs senior officials with senior officials from El Paso County, just to give you all a chance to find out more about how each of the various departments, the Sheriff's Office, the Police Department, the Office of Land Use Review, various things like that, how those all operate and what the differences are at the county, between the county and the city. And then we are very much hoping to do a series that we started but got Zoom bombed out of on coronavirus in El Paso County. And I think, having said that, we'll go into the rules. We're just going to make this very informal. Janet Knox, who you can see on your screen, is very capable at using Zoom and also capable at delivering a darn good education program. She's going to be doing that for us. Janet can say more about herself if she likes, but I'm going to say briefly that she served as an engineer in Silicon Valley, that she has been a management consultant for a good part of her career, and she has retired here and is active in a number of organizations, which is how I got to meet her, particularly through the American Association of University Women. And thank you all for participating. I think what we'll do now is ask everyone to turn on their cameras, and I think most of you have, and we will unmute people so that they can be heard. And Janet, do you want to ask everyone to introduce themselves, or do you want to say something first?
No, I think everybody could introduce themselves. That way we kind of have an idea of who's asking questions and that sort of thing.
And almost everyone has been unmuted, but I've got there, I think. And Barbara Novi didn't get unmuted, so sorry, Barbara. You should be unmuted very shortly. There you are.
I muted myself, Dave, because my dog is barking at a squirrel.
Well, then I will let you go ahead and mute yourself back up, Barbara.
Or I could introduce him. I don't either.
Go right ahead.
Hi, this is Ozzy. And
Hi, Ozzy.
There you go. I'm pretty well versed in these tools, but it was worth joining on today. You know, you always see what you can learn. Thank you. I'm with the Mesa Springs Community Association up over here by Sonderman Park, by Uinta and Chestnut.
Great, thank you. Let's see, why don't we ask Yvonne Conrad to introduce herself.
I'm Yvonne Conrad, and I've known Paula and Dave for quite some time, and Paula and I work together with Front Porch Giving Circle, and we're planning a meeting next Wednesday, and I thought it might be a great idea for me to learn some things about how to conduct the meeting.
Good to have you, Yvonne.
Thank you.
Karen McVeigh, you're next. Karen? I don't think Karen can hear me for some reason. We'll come back. Pat Doyle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Pat Doyle, Old North End neighborhood. I need to learn maybe how to invite people onto Zoom.
Okay. And Larry Weglin, Larry, the light is behind you, so it's hard for us to see you. If you can adjust that a little bit, it'd be better for our ability to view you. But would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Larry Weglin, retired professor from Colorado School of Mines, just trying to keep up to speed with what's new out there.
Very good. And Karen McVeigh, can you hear me now? Karen looks a little puzzled, so I'll try one more time, and then Janet, it will be all yours. Karen McVeigh, can you hear me now? Okay. Go ahead, Janet.
All righty. Well, welcome everyone. I appreciate you joining, and I'm not a total expert on Zoom, but I have used it a bit and have done some research, and there are a lot of great resources you'll be able to access, and we'll talk about those at the end. I definitely will talk about how to invite people and about how to conduct larger meetings, and then you'll have some resources. So let's get started. So these are the things we're going to cover quickly, just the basics of Zoom, and because you're all on here, you've actually accomplished a lot of those things. There's some Zoom meeting etiquette points that are kind of interesting. Most of them are pretty obvious, but some of them you don't even think about unless you're using a device such as this. There are some things you can do with a free account, and we'll talk about host meeting controls, different things you can do to keep tabs on what's going on. We'll talk about meeting security, and then I'm going to give you some homework at the very end for some of your own research. So the basics, you can join in a meeting without an account. You don't have to sign up. You might be asked to download and install the Zoom app on whatever device you're using. So go ahead and do that. People can use computers, tablets, phones. They're slightly different in how the Zoom pictures, the thumbnails with the people's faces, how those look. And the in-meeting controls might be in different places depending on what kind of device you're using. But the things that you can control are your audio, so your microphone, as well as the speakers. So those are two separate controls. And then the video, of course, you can turn that on and off. You can share your screen, and that's what I'm doing right now. And then you'll also be able to have a chat function. And as I mentioned, those controls are going to depend on what kind of, the location of those controls is going to depend on what kind of device you're using. And if you have questions at any time, go ahead and wave or raise your hand, and we'll get there. And you can also put your questions in the chat feature, and we'll take a look at those at the end.
And some of, excuse me, Janet, some of you apparently don't have a working microphone, so the chat function might be the best for you, and I will do my best to keep track of that so Janet can keep talking until there's an opportunity to ask your question for you. And there are two other people I didn't introduce. One's my spouse, who is on from the beginning. Paula is there, Do you
Hi.
want, there you go. And the other is Stephanie Search, who just joined us a little while ago. And Stephanie, would you like to say anything about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually new to Kono. Was hired as a program officer, and this is my first week on the job, so I'm happy to be here and just kind of taking it all in, and have really enjoyed the webinar so far. I was actually on the one yesterday, but I'm not sure if you could see me. I was having a little trouble with my video, but it was really helpful.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're back with us. And then
Yeah.
Louise Connor is with us. I don't think she has a camera. So Louise, can you speak? Maybe not. Louise is an old friend from the Shooks Run area and been very active in organizing and keeping that neighborhood organized. And then I think Rainey Perot is on, but I'm not sure. Rainey, by phone. Rainey, can you hear us? Is there somebody else who's on by phone that I am not recognizing? Okay, Janet, back to you.
No problem. One of the advantages of doing something like this is you kind of get to become a little more familiar with your devices, and sometimes that takes a little bit of time. But talking about etiquette, and this is for attendees, so anytime you're on, and of course this includes hosts. So one of the best things about using Zoom is you can wear anything you want below the waist, but not, you need to be sure to wear something appropriate. Sometimes I've been on Zoom calls just with friends, and it's early enough in the morning that we're drinking coffee and we have our bathrobes on. But if you're holding a professional session or something with your neighborhood, you want to think about that. The other thing is with regard to background and lighting. So people can not only see you, but they can see that pile of dirty laundry behind you, or or some of those things. So you want to make sure that you think about what are they looking at besides you. Maybe talking about lighting. If you have good lighting, then they can see your faces. But if you're backlit, it is more difficult to see. So think about where the windows are compared to where the camera's pointing and things like that. Another thing is to be present and minimize and ignore distraction. It's easy to get caught up in looking at emails or composing a Word document or working on PowerPoint or looking at your phone while people are talking. And you really need to work on focusing a little bit more when you're using a device like this, because it is so easy to get distracted. And because we are working at home, you might have the random cat or child in the background. You just need to ignore those, those kind of distractions. So just be present, be thinking about, and this of course applies to any meeting, whether you're online or in person. Your camera and your microphone are important. If you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your phone just to make sure that background noise, maybe you've got a neighbor's dog or your puppy is a little noisy, or you're rattling papers, or maybe a neighbor's car alarm has gone off, different things like that. Maybe there are other people in the house that are making noise. That happens at my house sometimes. So, you know, feel free to mute your microphone unless you're talking. And it's nice to have your camera on because it's a lot easier to absorb what you're saying when you're talking to the camera. You don't want to look at yourself and notice, you know, gosh, I need a haircut. But look into the camera when you're talking. That's and then this whole being obnoxious thing, don't be a conversation hog. Don't interrupt. It's tough for the system to sync if everybody's talking at once. So when you've got a large meeting, it's good to have an agenda. And you know, the Giving Circle folks would probably be most likely to have something like this. But I've had a number of meetings with AAUW, as Dave mentioned, I'm a member with Paula and perhaps a few other folks. But having an agenda is very helpful to keep people on track. So, and the other thing is, sometimes you forget that people can see you. So you don't want to be eating. You know, we're not supposed to touch our face, so, you know, no nose picking or anything like that. And you'd be surprised at who forgets that they are on camera and they just sort of wander off to their bathroom. So you don't want to do that. If you're going to have to do something like that, turn your video off. So that's something to keep in mind. Now for hosts, there are a few extra things you need to think about. Because having a cast of thousands on your call can be pretty disruptive. People don't want to go to meetings anyway, usually. Just the nature of the beast, but you have to do that to get things done sometimes. So just invite the people who need to be there. And if other people need to be aware of what happened, you can always record the meeting and then provide that to them later. If you don't know all of the attendees, it's good to introduce yourself and the attendees, have them introduce themselves to each other. I know sometimes I'm in groups that don't meet terribly often, and it's nice to be reminded of who people are and what they look like. Be sure and prepare your materials ahead of time and be organized. That's something that it takes a little bit of, let's take a deep breath the day before and make sure we have everything organized. But that's important. And then as a host, just like at a party, you want to be the last to leave. And that allows people to kind of leave at their leisure, get any last minute questions answered. And it's just a more helpful thing. Anybody have any other ideas about what works or doesn't on some of these meetings? I know some of you have been on these.
I had a question, Janet. Sure. Well, first I want to say too, I appreciate you doing this because I, you know, prior to this, you know, I think we're all using probably these Zoom meetings, you know, quite a bit more than we had in the past. And I've only used it a handful of times really before, you know, we were all kind of, you know, kind of moved to working at home. So, the biggest question I had is in the bigger meetings when you have multiple people, is there a way that's like optimal to sort of like orient your screen so that you can see everybody, and particularly if people want to ask questions, what is the best way to sort of facilitate that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the examples of in-meeting controls is whether you look at the speaker view or the grid. And on a computer, it's in the upper right-hand corner. And so you're able to arrange all the thumbnails in a different way. Right now, I have everybody across the top, but everybody doesn't fit. So I would have to scroll left or right. So some of the controls you need to kind of play around with because of your device might be a little bit different. But and then in conducting a meeting, you can decide whether you want everybody to be visible or just the host or speaker. If you're doing a webinar where you're really focusing on presenting material, I've been on a few things with the Archaeology Society, and yesterday I was on something with the Philharmonic, and I couldn't see or hear any of the participants, and that was considered a webinar when the host set it up. So it depends on how much interaction you want. If you're going to have more than, I don't know, 15 people, I guess would be my number, you might want to restrict the interactions to the chat room. You know, at the bottom there, well, most people at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat button that you'll be able to see. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that did. Yeah. I was just thinking too, what would you say then, probably about 15 people like is max on sort of who you'd have on the screen. And then beyond that, if you had a larger group, you'd probably just go to the more like just chat mode.
Yeah, because when you think about trying to um, have a meeting where you've got a lot of people providing input,
Mhm.
it can get a little bit rowdy even if you're in session or everybody there in person. And then
Yeah.
when when you're dealing with a system like Zoom, really only one, maybe two people can be heard at once.
Okay.
And what it does do, if you have everybody's video on, you can kind of tell by the nonverbals if somebody wanted to sneak in there.
Mhm.
There's also the raise your hand function, and you can literally just have people raise their hand too. So there are a couple of different ways to approach that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
And my suggestion, Janet, Stephanie, did you notice you can click on that icon with the multiple boxes up at the top, but then you can stretch your screen from the very bottom corner so that in practicing right now, I can see each of these little boxes for the entire group.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it wasn't intuitive to me that the screen expanded from the bottom corner. So
Yeah.
I just thought I'd point it out.
No, yeah, yeah, thanks. Like I said, I'm actually still like learning the ropes, especially like there's a little different, participant versus host. So no, that's helpful. And any little tips you have are helpful. Thanks.
And most of your meetings, you won't necessarily have someone sharing their screen like I am. And so the only thing you will have to see are the thumbnails of people's faces anyway.
Mhm.
And so that you can take up the whole screen and stretch it. Thanks, Barbara, for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Okay. So some of the things you can do with a free account, you can join a meeting, of course, and you can start a new meeting using an instant meeting. You can also schedule a meeting ahead of time and have it set for a particular date and time. You can record a meeting, and there are certainly a lot of other features available in the paid plans that are available. The instant meeting time limit right now is 40 minutes. A few weeks ago, when Zoom was not terribly busy, they sometimes would automatically extend the meetings to another 40 minutes. They're being used quite a bit right now, and so they really don't have that extra luxury. But what you can do is just have everybody go back to the link that they clicked and start another 40-minute timer. And you just need to talk about that ahead of time. So that's the case with the free meeting or the free account. So it is pretty usable.
And I did notice, I think Janet too, it's only like if you have 3 or more people. I know this morning I was on a call and I just have the free account and there was only 2 of us and it seemed like it just went, indefinitely. Am I correct on that?
You actually, yes, you are. If you only have a few people, then it can go longer than 40 minutes. And maybe it is 2 or 3. I'm not really sure what the number is. Barbara, you're nodding your head like you.
Yeah, 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have 3 or fewer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think this may have been said, but I'll reiterate it. Zoom has been very generous in these times, especially with letting all sorts of meetings go beyond their designated time. So that you may experience that as well. If they're not experiencing lots of volume, they'll probably let you go.
And an alternative too, if you don't necessarily need visuals, I have a free account with freeconferencecall.com if all you want to do is have phone. So that's something else to think about. But you can Google free conference call and a lot of things will come up in that. So so when you're hosting a meeting, there are a number of controls and things to pay attention to. You can manage participants actually quite well. You can remove participants if they're being disruptive or being inappropriate. And you can also just mute or disable their video. So there is a way to manage participants with regard to that. In the chat box, you kind of need to monitor what people are putting in the chat room as the host, and that's where they have questions. The private chat can be disabled, and when you're in the chat box, you can receive your message. If it's all participants, just the hosts, or a particular participant. And sometimes that can be distracting if you really need people to pay attention, or if someone is being inappropriate or something, you can disable the private chat. The screen sharing can be done by the host, or you can allow your participants. Sometimes when you're working through a problem, it's helpful for someone to show perhaps an example of something. And so you can, as a host, you can decide who is able to share their screen. And then there's a function called poll questions. So Dave and I didn't quite get this far in our planning, but there is a function where you can put on everyone's screen a multiple choice question and then show the results, how many respondents for each answer. And that's kind of fun, especially if you've got a situation where you really need people to pay attention, or part of your agenda is to gather information about what people are thinking or what they already know. When I was on the Philharmonic webinar, I guess it was, they were interviewing a couple who are in the Philharmonic. One was a clarinet player, the husband wasn't, and the wife was a violin player. And so they were asking the participants about their familiarity with the different parts of a clarinet. Is it XYZ? Is it ABC? What's the order that you put the clarinet together? So it was just kind of a fun little interesting thing to do. But of course you can have that be a little more serious. Now with regard to security, there are quite a few security settings on the host toolbar when you click on the security icon. You only want to share passwords with people who you need to be there. And this might be appropriate for a meeting where you're discussing something confidential. So if you are, for instance, having an HOA board meeting, you only want board members and residents to be allowed to enter the meeting. Sometimes the board needs to have a confidential meeting. There may be people that you really don't want to be there, but you can't avoid them forever. So, sometimes you just have to let everybody in. But just make private meetings private. And if you are Zoom bombed, Zoom would like to have you report the information. And there's a link on the website. So the date, the time, the meeting ID, and any other relevant information. Having people register the way that Dave had us register for this is a really good way to keep things private. So Dave, I don't know if you have any other thoughts regarding your experiences.
Yes, we got Zoom bombed. I think I may have mentioned that when we started. We got Zoom bombed when we tried to do our first Zoom meeting. We had 60 some people signed up to participate in a meeting on a webinar on coronavirus in El Paso, in the Pikes Peak region. And about 3 minutes into that, a couple, it seemed like young people started messing up with our screen and using bad language and all that sort of stuff. We finally, just after about 4 or 5 minutes, we terminated that whole process. I will say that I've never had that happen in a meeting that was private. That is, we've done a lot of Zoom meetings for the Kono board, for my own neighborhood here in Friendship, Friendship Cresa Mesa. And we've used Zoom for some other foundation boards on which I've been. I think as long as you haven't posted the number on the web, you're probably fine. But if you are going to post your meeting on the web, then I would strongly recommend you ask people to register, because it will discourage. It's actually impossible for a robot, which I think a lot of these things are done by, a robot to go in and register for a Zoom meeting if that's required. So it's a great way. It also does, I think, however, discourage last minute signups. But as somebody once said to me, at least, life is a series of trade-offs. So that's one of them.
Yeah. And if you want to publicize your meeting publicly, then having them register, and then they only get the link or the password directly from you, that can be done. And then the way all of us were in the waiting room until Dave let us in, that's another way for the host to kind of control things too, if they know the people involved. So
I did want to mention too, Dave, that I just kind of went into this webinar like from the Kono calendar. So even though the meeting had already started and we were like 2 or 3 minutes in, even though I hadn't like registered up to that point, it did say just join meeting in progress, and then I could register like right then and there. So,
Good.
So yeah, so even if people just see it on the calendar and they hadn't pre-registered and they jump in, I think it seemed like it still allowed, you know, me, of course, to jump in on the webinar.
That's good to know. Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah.
and I think we're all learning little tricks and tips too. So it's good. Sometimes you just have to experiment. So this is where your homework comes in. If you're going to host a meeting, it's nice to kind of practice a little bit with your device. And if you're using a device for the first time, this is something you want to do. So you want to join a test meeting. And this is the link for it. Excuse me. There's a
It's a good
support
thing you're
center.
self-isolated, Janet.
I'm sorry?
It's a good thing you're self-isolating.
Yeah. Excuse me. I mean, believe it or not, I'm not used to talking this lately. So let me switch over to the Zoom website here. And way at the bottom, so I'm going to pull this down all the way to the bottom of the website. And down here is something called Support Center. If we click on that, you can see there are a whole bunch of different topics that they can help you with. And then they also have these little 1-minute intros for different topics as well. So they actually have a pretty robust help center. And then if you go to YouTube, I think you can learn to do almost anything on YouTube these days. There's a gentleman that Dave's familiar with that has a lot of really good stuff. And you can find him by, let me go back here. Oh, Dotto. Dave has used some of these videos, especially for, and I think he's got a new one for security.
He does. A new one on the new features of Zoom security. Mr. Dotto has an unusual name, and he's an unusual guy, but he's a pretty darn good teacher. He's, not that it matters much, he's Canadian, but so there's a little bit of a Canadian accent, but he comes across as a very individual sort of guy. So he's worth listening to just for that, if nothing else.
For some entertainment.
Yeah.
So that's another way to learn how to use this too, if you have a specific question. So I don't know if there were any questions in the chat area you, Dave?
I think we have covered, I think I've answered most of them. There was a question uh, about recording, and you might want to deal with that because you can, as the host, restrict the recording to yourself, or you can allow everyone to record.
Right. Okay. So that's another host control that you need to think about how you want to allow people to do that.
So someone can record a session that you're not recording.
If the host allows it.
If the host,
if the host, okay.
and
But you know, I was also wondering, have you come across, Janet? I have been on a few of these things in webinars, and as people might be starting up or, you know, waiting for people to join, they use a still photo of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes they just sit there with the pretty photo and you never actually see their face, but which I could see for like a short, you know, where you're not trying to have interaction, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but do you have any
Yeah.
tips, or have you seen that on Zoom?
I have seen that on other applications. Excuse me. The sometimes bandwidth can be a problem. When I have had webinars with people in Europe or in India, sometimes it is rather challenging to get the syncing to work on the video. And sometimes you just need a haircut. But I think in your profile on your account, you can upload a photo to be used for that.
Oh, that's a great tip. Thank you. And I hope folks who were looking at the view options found that you can do this side-by-side mode to squish the screen print, you know, so you can make your display of what Janet's showing you much smaller and still see the slide, and then see all of the faces on the other side of the screen.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
There's that thing up at the top that shows up when you move your cursor to the very top of the screen.
And I'm going to play. What other questions are out there? Anything else?
Janet,
Nicole has a question.
Janet, we're going to be doing this Zoom meeting. Could be up to 45 people on it, probably will not be, but we're not exactly clear how many have had the experience of Zoom. And I know in some other events that I've been in, the person has volunteered to kind of do a training session. Can that be done? Should that be done just one-on-one, or can it just be a training session before the actual event with more than one person?
A lot of it depends on what the person is trained on. There are definitely people who are not familiar enough with their device to know how to turn the microphone on or the speakers on or the video, and that's something that's challenging if you're not physically with them because you're not sure what devices. So that can be tricky. And then there are just the basic kind of things that I went over that would be fine to do in a group. And it may just be, it might be simpler to find a short YouTube video on the use of Zoom and have them look at that. That way you're not reinventing the wheel. So that's another way to think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, were there other questions in the chat room that everybody would like to hear about, or?
I think that was basically it, but if not, please either send us a chat again or speak up.
I have a question, Janet.
Yes.
this is a pretty basic question, so I'm a little embarrassed to ask it, but when you initially like are scheduling a Zoom meeting as a host, and the scheduling icon on the app per se kind of sends an email to all the invited guests, is there a way to make sure that they actually got that invite, aside from them like just confirming yes or no, on that invite? Is there a way to see that they actually got that?
I am not sure. I know that when you send an email from an email account, you can ask for a read receipt or an open receipt sometimes, but I'm not sure if Zoom has.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because, and I've been, kind of at fault in this too. Sometimes people, they see the invite, but they just don't RSVP, and then I'm never sure, like, did they get it? Did they not get it? And so.
Yeah, and that's where the registering can kind of help a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Great.
I have a question.
Yes.
Paula disappears, Yvonne disappears. Have they shut off their video? Is that what has happened?
No, I'm still
Well,
here.
I'm still here.
I'm still
So
here.
their video will appear when they start talking again.
Okay.
And so you probably only have so many available. Now let me stop sharing here. And so now you may be able to see a lot more of the thumbnails.
So how do you make yourself bigger?
How do you make yourself bigger?
Yeah, if I want to make myself spread out onto the screen, if I'm speaking, do I do anything or do you have to do it?
Okay, there's a grid view and there's a speaker view. And on my computer in the upper right-hand corner, there's something, I see speaker view. Everybody's on grid view right now. If I hit speaker view, then I only see me. If I hit the little waffle, that means grid view.
Mm-hmm.
You see that?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's how you would do that.
So Pat, while you were speaking, you
Mhm.
were on the big screen.
Because she had
Ooh.
done something to, yeah,
No.
all right.
Right. For your
I just
I just
display.
can't see that. That's, I guess,
Right.
which is just as well. I'm not interested in seeing it, but I just,
And you can also, if you hover over your own thumbnail, there is a mute button and then there are 3 dots. And if you click on that 3 dots, mute my audio, stop video, pin video, and hide self view comes up. That's the menu I see. And other people may see something a little bit different. I'm not sure. Does everybody see that kind of when you hover over your own?
Yes, it's the same menu.
Hover over somebody else's. Yeah. They're different little things that you see.
And Louise Connor's pointing out by chat that when she is in grid view, there's a yellow line around the box of the person who's speaking. And I think we had one of our telephone participants try to say something, and I suspect we drowned him out. So I'll ask him to speak again.
Okay. There was background noise
Still
too.
not hearing anybody. If you're on the phone and you're trying to ask a question, we aren't hearing you. But if you will text me, Dave Munger, at 719-337-5838, I'll be glad to relay your questions to everybody, or just to Janet.
Or just a date.
Or there we go. So that's 719-337-5838.
So I have a question. When we are going to do our meeting next week and we have a presenter who is very familiar with all the tools and he'll be doing everything for the most part, but when he's done, some of the members may have questions. So how will I need to do something as the host to be able to see the person who has the question? Because I know it'll highlight in yellow, but he will have the screen. So do I need to instruct the members to do anything so that they'll be able to see who's speaking? I don't know if that even made sense, but
No, it does. It does.
Okay.
So if the speaker is very familiar, you could make them a co-host with you. And that way they have all of the controls as well.
Okay.
And then you can also have people use the group chat. And if it's set up as a webinar specifically, the participants won't have their video or audio on, but there will be a Q&A area as well. So there are a few different options, and your presenter may have some preferences regarding that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
And I saw that Barbara Novi was either clapping or raising her hand. So you would like to speak, Barbara, and I'll unmute.
I wanted to see if Yvonne could see that there was a way to interact with using these. Can you see that in the upper corner of my face?
I see your thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have some way to provide a bit of a reaction. You can ask someone to, who agrees with, and you can get people to give you a different react. It's one way to interact with your group.
Yeah.
Okay. And I do see reactions at the bottom of the
Right on.
Great.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Good idea.
And then there's a raise your hand. Oh, look at this.
I just did that now when you were talking about the clarinet, Janet.
All right.
Just
All
so
right.
people could see
So
that.
does everybody see the poll? What's your favorite instrument?
Yes.
Okay, so answer and submit. And then Dave is going to be able to show us the responses.
Right, I think.
Well, a lot of it is just playing with it too.
That's right, exactly.
Everybody vote?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's see, we've got 10, so there's 2 people who haven't voted yet.
Okay, well, we've got a
Actually,
phone
11.
participant.
You have 2 people who aren't connected.
Yeah, well, 91%
Video.
of us have voted, so I'll end the voting.
Okay, so what are the
Share
results? Drum roll. Oh, look at that. No one likes the clarinet? Really?
I'm surprised that 3 people chose the triangle, but I suspect.
I'm getting ready
Well-
for the Colorado-wide drum tonight with my triangle.
Well, should have had cowbell, and then everybody would have voted for that. So,
There you go.
so, okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking time to do this, and you had some very good questions. Most of them we could answer, not always, but they've all handed over to you to close up.
All right. Thank you very much, Janet. This was, for me, a lot of fun. I hope all of you enjoyed it and learned something from it as well. We have recorded this. It will be available sometime within the next 24 hours, I'm told. I don't think we've decided exactly what we'll do with it, but we'll send out an announcement on our email and also on our website. It may end up being on the website. It's also possible it'll end up on YouTube, or both. If you have any other suggestions for what you'd like to have be the subject of a webcast, such as additional social media to use, or let's say the state of the economy, the likely state of the economy in the Pikes Peak region as a result of coronavirus and the recession we're going to be in probably. Those sorts of things, please let us know. You can reach me at P as in Paul, D as in David, MUNGER ediemunger@aol.com. And I think I gave you all my phone number, but it's 719-337-5838. I'd love to hear from you. If you have something you want to say that you don't want to say in front of anybody else, don't hesitate to give me a call. And I think that is basically where we are. So thank you all for participating. I thought this was a good group. Honestly, this was sort of an experiment for Janet and me, because we thought that we weren't sure that the group would be small enough to be able to deal with all the people, but we thought it was small enough to at least give it a try, and I thought it worked out very well. One of the people who left us just now was the person you kept hearing the heavy breathing from, and I could not get him to read my chat for some reason, because I kept asking him to move his mic away from his face. Something you might keep in mind for the future.
Darth Vader.
Move that microphone out a bit so the breathing doesn't show up. Anyway, other than that, I thought we had a pretty painless and error-free web chat, or what is the right term now? In any event.
You're a Zoomer now, Dave. It's zooming.
It's zooming, that's right. A webcast is what I was thinking of.
There you go.
Thanks for jogging my mind.
Zoom it, zoom
All
it.
right, thank you all very much. Again, give us a call if you've got some suggestions for either what to do or what not to do. Janet, very much in your debt. Thanks for taking this on.
Yeah,
And-
thank you.
Just
and
fine.
we'll-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye to all of you. Hope to see you someplace else sometime soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Bye. I don't know why I came to
Thanks, Janet. You did a great job.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.